Well, good morning. This is Dr. Bill Williams on the Influencers Podcast. Saturday morning, a great day in Atlanta, Georgia. And while the skies are overcast, thunder and lightning is frequently coming by the house, we're here today to talk to a friend of mine. This is a rare occasion that we have to bring on a really good friend of mine that I've known for over a decade. And I've grown to love and respect her for what she has accomplished in her life. And today we're going to be talking with my friend Sally Saxon, the author of a new book that just was released this month, COVID-19 Vaccines and Beyond. And Sally has written a book with the help of several physicians that will enlighten and probably shock you when you have read this book. And I encourage everyone to look into it. Now, without further ado, let's bring on my friend Sally Saxon to be with us today on the Influencers Podcast. Hi, Sally.
Good morning, Dr. Bill. Good to be here. Thank you so much.
Good. You're looking well. Thanks for getting up so early this morning.
Oh, absolutely. No problem. It's good for me.
Yeah, you're down in the panhandle of Florida, I understand. So typically, this is a great time of year, spring break, and everybody's having a good time down in your neck of the woods.
Yeah. This is a challenging time for us locals down here.
Yeah, you have an invasion, I know, once a year called spring break, and I've done that before, been down to the panhandle during my college years, so I know what it looks like, although I didn't quite participate in the famous way that a lot of people hear about on spring break. I was very sedate compared to some of the things you see.
Yeah, it can get a little bit crazy, and then spring break is only the beginning of it. It kind of lasts through the summer and into the early fall.
Yeah, it's a natural playground for people down on the panhandle. Mm-hmm. Well, I love talking about Florida and that area of the world because I spent many a summer vacation on that same Florida panhandle along the Apalachicola Bay. But today we want to talk about your area of expertise. You're an attorney. You're accomplished in many circles, but you wrote a book recently, and I want you to talk about that book and what led you to put that together, and how did you begin this journey?
Okay, well, actually, I was in the process of updating and expanding a previous book that I had written and published in 2020. And I was going to add a couple chapters on COVID. And then I kind of got detoured into focusing just on the COVID shots because I was reading and hearing about so many stories of people who'd experienced severe injuries, from the shots. And their stories were just heartbreaking in every way. So I, started to put that into like a separate document. And it was going to be just like a little report that I was going to distribute to doctors in my local area to try to persuade them to stop the shots. And then that grew into a booklet as I did more and more research and found out more and more evidence of the dangers of these shots. And then it expanded into a bigger booklet. And at that point, I was introduced to Dr. Deb Viglione, who's board certified in internal medicine, because I was looking for some medical professional to critique the writing from the medical perspective, to make sure I had everything right, as far as medical things were concerned. And also, did I leave anything out? Did I have something in there that should come out and so forth? And then she looked at it and thought, oh my goodness, this is just what she had been looking for. A lot of this evidence all in one place. And I didn't know anyone was looking for, that kind of information all in one place. She shared it with her friend, Dr. Jim Thorpe, who's an OB/GYN and maternal fetal specialist. And the two of them decided they needed to help me, with this. And so we expanded the book. because Dr. Deb said that whenever she speaks to a group of healthcare professionals about these subjects, the most frequently asked question she got was, "Why haven't we heard this before?" So I decided that well, we should address that in the book. So the book expanded, and next, to make a longer story short, we ended up with a whole book, and then they showed the manuscript to some of their doctors in the health freedom movement, and I didn't even know who they knew, uh, but turned out, we end up getting not only an endorsement from people like Dr. Peter McCullough, who many of your audience may be very familiar with, but he wrote the entire back cover, and then we got endorsements from some of the other doctors who are very active in the health freedom movement, and here we are. But actually, the paperback version of the book was released first back late November, around Thanksgiving time, and it wasn't until just recently in March that the ebook version was released. And I should mention too that I'm a retired attorney. I haven't been in practice for quite a while, but once you're trained to think like a lawyer, that sticks with you for life. And so it's all about gathering evidence and looking at evidence. And I encourage people to look at these kinds of controversial issues from the perspective of a jury, like especially if you were a defendant in a trial, either civil or criminal, how would you want a jury to consider the evidence in your case? You want them to hear just the one side, the plaintiff's side, or the prosecutor's side, or do you want them to hear all the your evidence as well? And I wasn't looking to just present one side of the evidence, but the problem here is that in the major media, there's only one side presented, and so the question is, when I started doing more research on this, one of the questions that came to my mind is, okay, if these shots are so safe and effective, why are there so many doctors and scientists and other professionals willing to risk losing everything to warn people of something that is alleged to be misinformation? If what they're saying is really misinformation, why would they be willing to risk losing their reputation, their professional credentials, their livelihoods, for something that isn't true? So, that's kind of one of the tests that people can apply to, assess people's credibility when you're looking at whose report are you going to believe, in a controversial subject like this.
Yeah, I like the attorney's perspective because you're supposed to have the balance, the blind scales of justice, and you're supposed to weigh evidence on both sides and come out with the truth rather than what other things that could come out. So that leads me to the question I often ask people about failure. Why do people fail to see this truth that's kind of being hidden by the mainstream? Why do people fall into the trap that they've laid? Why do people actually not know what you share in this book?
Okay, well, one reason, there's more than one reason, but I think that one main reason is that especially healthcare professionals have come to rely so much on the advice of the CDC. That's the way they're trained. Like in medical school, it's like, well, the CDC says this, or the FDA, and then you've got the governing medical boards and the medical publications. The big ones like New England Journal of Medicine and so forth, and they come to rely on those, and also so it's very difficult for many to believe that these people, like at the top in these positions of trust. People we've entrusted, to tell us correct information. It's very difficult to believe that they would lie to us and even betray us on something as important as matters of life and death. It's very difficult to make that shift. Like it's sort of like Hitler's big lie. It's easier for people to believe the bigger lies than it is to believe the smaller lies. Because it's for a normal person, it's just hard to believe that anyone would lie to us about something as serious as matters of life and death. And so there's a much bigger picture and much bigger agenda going on here, which we can probably get into, shortly. But so that's part of it. And for some people, because the major media is very controlled, and they only present one side of the evidence, and kind of mock the other side and call it conspiracy theory and so forth, and they demean the alleged misinformation spreaders, the doctors who've been trying to give warnings to people that these shots are not only not safe and effective for everyone, but actually dangerous for many. Although one important point is that because have been great inconsistencies in the vials of vaccines, even from the same manufacturer, in terms of what's actually in the vials. This is what the researchers have found, that not everybody got the same thing. So you'll find some people who got the shots who seem to be doing just fine, didn't seem to have any particular bad adverse reaction, whereas other people died very quickly, either the same day or within several days, within a couple of weeks, or perhaps months later, or suffered some kind of serious injury very shortly after the vaccine. And but it's very difficult, I think, for professionals to acknowledge that that they may have been lied to and may have given some bad recommendations early on because they were relying on what they were told, and they had not done their own research on the subject. Because if you start doing your own research, you will find out that, and there's a ton of information in the independent media from unbiased and independent sources, that if you just start following that, you'll see that there's a whole different body of evidence that is credible, unbiased, independent, versus the evidence that's presented in the major media that comes from sources where there are tremendous conflicts of interest, and there's a lot of claims, but they often are not supported by any actual evidence or any credible evidence. But there's a lot of conflicts of interest and a lot of misrepresentations, and manipulation of data was kind of off the charts in this. As I was doing my research, it seemed that on virtually every point that concerning the data and the evidence, on virtually every point where they could lie or deceive people about something, or manipulate the data, or misrepresent something, they did. And so we've got the court of public opinion, and then we've got the other side. So doing your own research on this is really important, and it is noteworthy that there are more and more doctors and other healthcare professionals, as well as other people, coming to realize now that what they've heard in the major media, all this time, is not quite exactly what's going on.
Well, Sally, you've laid out a good opening argument against the safety and effectiveness of this vaccine. What really motivates you internally to keep pushing the agenda uh, against this vaccine? What really drives you to be the force that is one who's on a national level now speaking out against what's happened over the last 3 or 4 years?
Well, very simply, it's the fact that so many people have been seriously injured and their lives have been turned upside down, and a lot of people have died. So and oftentimes it's the main family breadwinner, and a father who left 3 or 4 little kids and his wife, or a mom who was in healthcare and now can no longer function. She can't do her job, so they've lost income in the household. Uh, Besides the debilitating physical injuries that have been suffered, uh, the loss of the income, and it disrupts the whole family relationships, because when somebody needs care maybe 24/7 and they can no longer take care of themselves, much less their family, it changes the dynamics in the whole family situation. And at the same time, their expenses are increasing while their income has gone down. The insurance companies often will not pay for any of the medical expenses. A lot of them feel abandoned by their doctors, because so often the doctors will look at the person's injuries and say, well, we think it's all in your head. And they don't recognize or acknowledge that it has any connection with the vaccine, because all too often the doctors are persuaded that, well, the vaccines are safe and effective, and therefore this person's injuries could not possibly have been related to the vaccine. Um, but in fact, when you look at the Bradford Hill criteria for causation, which I won't go into a lot, but doctors will know what that's about. Uh, the criteria line up to show that there is indeed a significant causative factor here, and some of the doctors have actually come around to seeing that, such as one of the cardiologists from the UK, who named Dr. Asim Malhotra. He Originally, when the vaccines came out, he was one of the ones who would publicly promote them. But then his own father, who was also a doctor, who was in very good shape for his age, very good condition, very healthy and fit. Uh, he had the shots, and 6 months later, he died of cardiac issues. And Dr. Malhotra was, just very puzzled about this, because, he had thought that his dad was in excellent condition. How come all of a sudden he died of heart attack? And he found out that like one of his main arteries was like 90% blocked. The other one was like 70 or 75, I think. I talk about it in the book. And it's like, well, how can that be? And we're finding more and more that issues like myocarditis or other heart issues are a major side effect from the shots, but a lot of doctors just are not making that connection. And part of it is because if they work in a hospital, there's a lot of pressure to disassociate the shots from any kind of injuries that people are coming in with. So this is a connection that needs to be made. And one question here is, how is it that doctors are so easily able to say, oh, there's no connection here between your injury and the shots, when sometimes in one of the vaccine injury courts, it takes years, for them to determine that there was a connection. So how are the doctors so easily saying that no, no connection here? And so, and this is this is difficult for me because I come from a family of many healthcare professionals. My dad was a doctor, my mom was a nurse. I have other, in-laws, cousins who are doctors, and so my inclination is to want to stand up for them, you know, and for the whole profession as a whole, because I hate to see lawyers just filing lawsuits at doctors for just to try to shake some money loose, for things that they should never be suing for. But so that's my perspective. So it's very hard now to um, be looking at evidence which shows that there are some major issues on the part of uh, the medical profession where they need to take a closer look at what's the real cause of my patients problems that they're coming to me with, because it's very it makes it even more difficult on the patients when they come in with serious injuries and their doctor tells them no, it could not have been caused by the vaccine.
Well, you identify a lot of these issues in the book, and I know we want to get on to the main topic of the book. Can you give us a little bit of some insights about the place we can get this? You can share where people can get this. And also, I want to talk briefly about the audience. Who's this written for? So go ahead and tell us where we can get the book.
Okay, well, right now it's available on Amazon. So if you go to Amazon and put in my name, Sally Saxon, you'll see the book. There's a couple books there, but look for the one with the blue cover about the vaccines. And also on my website is sallysaxon.com. You'll find some other information about the book there, also with a link to Amazon, so that if for any reason we stop printing through Amazon, you can always go to the website, and I may post some updates and things there, because there's so much more information coming out now since the book was originally published. It's very difficult to keep up with, but it's very, very important information. So that was the answer to where can you get it. And your other question was?
You said you're going to have an ebook come available too. Tell us about that.
Okay, yeah, the ebook is available now. That came out last month. It's the same content as the paperback. It's just the digital version of it. And so, and by the way, both books have they have the same content. So there's over 600 footnotes, in the book. Which is what a lot of the doctors who endorsed our book really appreciated, because it's not just opinion or statements without any sources. It's like, here's the sources, so people can go and check those and see, where is this information coming from? Why should we believe, these statements?
They back up their statements with scientific studies and facts.
Yeah. So there's a lot of data in the book. And one of the key things is that we're using the CDC's own data, the FDA's own data and documents, statements on their websites, as well as from the manufacturers themselves, especially Pfizer, because there's more information available from them. And it's like, looking at their own documents and say, well, here's their data. How can they look at their own data and say, oh, the shots are safe and effective? Or look at the data and say, yeah, nothing to see here. And it's like, so this is what frustrates a lot of the doctors who've been looking at the data of the CDC and Pfizer itself. And another issue on that point is that back in the late summer of 2021, when the mandates, just before some of the mandates were put in place, the FDA supposedly approved, the Pfizer shot. Before everything was under an emergency use authorization because these were experimental drugs, experimental shots. They'd never been used before with this mRNA platform technology. And so these were under emergency use only. They hadn't been approved by the FDA. But then, after they supposedly approved this one Pfizer shot, there was an organization of professionals who put in a Freedom of Information Act request, they sought all the documents on which the FDA relied to give its approval. And there were so many documents the FDA wanted up to 70, it came out to up to 75 years, in which to, produce these documents and give them to the other side. And it's like, who wants to wait up to 75 years to get all the documentation they've relied on? By then the issue's gonna go away. And so the judge fortunately said, no, you've got 8 months, to release all these documents. And there was maybe 400 some thousand documents to be released. So it's not a small task, but the fact that they would even ask, for such a slow rollout and release of the documents, tells you something. What are they trying to hide? I mean, if the shots are really safe and effective, wouldn't you want the public to know sooner rather than later all the documents and data they relied on to approve this, to show that it's safe and effective? Why would you want to drag that process out in such a controversial issue?
Well, I certainly do understand what you're talking about. This slow rollout has a ominous tone to it. And as we know, most of the conspiracy theories that have been proposed have come to be proven true across the board. And so we can highly doubt anything that comes out of the officialdom. And the people that put out the word have to be double checked at every turn. So let's talk a bit about what's your goal now in terms of releasing the book and going on a speaking tour as you have been. And what do you have as your goal in the future?
Okay. My goal, and along with my two contributing authors, Dr. Jim Thorpe and Dr. Deb Viglione, our goal is to just make as many people as possible aware that we've been lied to on a massive scale, and even betrayed about what these shots are all about. Because when you read the book, you find out that it's really not about public health. And there's a much bigger agenda here. And in a moment, I'd like to quote something from the book that kind of dispels any notion that this is just conspiracy theory. But basically, it's really wanting to get this information into the hands of as many people as possible, especially healthcare professionals, but not only healthcare professionals, but they're the ones who make the recommendations often to their patients that, yeah, I think you ought to get these shots. So, we're seeking to just get the word out as much as possible, not to get these shots. Now, I'm not a healthcare professional, so I, can't really make that recommendation, but I'm saying people need to do their own research to see from the independent media. There's a ton of information out there, and you only need to look at a small portion of it. And for example, just even if you only read a small portion of our book, for example, by the way, the subtitle is What the Medical Industrial Complex is Not Telling Us. And that kind of says it all about what the book is about. But it gives the data, a lot of data on a lot of different issues. like why a vaccine was never even necessary in the first place, why these aren't even really vaccines by any definition, and the safety data, why they're not safe, why they haven't proven effective. And then another part of the book goes into the bigger picture behind the vaccines and the big picture that all things COVID fit into, actually, including what's in the shots, and so we're on this mission to get the word out, and we're just joining with a lot of other doctors and scientists who've, for the last even more than 2 years, 2.5 years, even before the vaccines were even rolled out, to to warn people that what we hear in the major media is not what the truth is about what's really going on here, and the data kind of speaks for itself. And so we're asking people, look at the evidence for yourself and then decide whose report are you going to believe, because literally people's lives are at risk. And it's not only their health that's at risk, but these same issues and the bigger agenda behind all things COVID actually affects every aspect of our lives, and in a very major way. So people who are unaware of this bigger picture are going to find themselves encountering some challenges that they won't know how to respond to in a way that is the best for themselves and their families.
Sally, a lot of times when I'm talking with my guests, I ask them to look back on their life and tell us what they would do if they were giving themselves advice when they were a 20-year-old. But I want to rearrange that question now to have you address all 20-year-olds coming out of the COVID years and the impact that had on us as a society. What advice would you give young people today going forward?
Okay, well, I would say, first of all, there's a need to do your own research and not to just depend on what you hear in the major media, because you will get two very different sides of the story. And so that's one thing. The other thing is have an open mind, about these things, because I'm trying to think how to put this in a kind way. But there's been a lot of sort of control over in the educational circles. Even through the college level, that's starting way early with even preschool, where they're no longer teaching you how to think, but they're trying to teach you what to think and tell you what you should think on every issue. And there's a huge difference there. And, freedom is literally at stake here. And, if you want to preserve your freedom, then you need to learn how to think critically and to question, what you've been told. Like, question what I'm saying, question, what's in this book that we've written, look up the sources, for yourself and decide, which side has the most credible evidence. And so thinking critically is another important thing. Questioning what you're told, and rather than just blindly accepting that, oh, the shots are safe and effective. Well, what's that based on? When you start looking, you'll find that it's not based on what you think it is. And then also, do not fear, because there's a lot of fear mongering that's been associated with all things COVID for the last few years. Because when people are fearful and made to be fearful, they're easier to control. And understand and learn about the bigger agenda that's at stake here, because it's critical to your entire life and every aspect of your life, because it's not only people's lives that are at stake here and the quality of your life, but it has to do with your freedom to make choices as to how you want to live rather than being dictated to and having things so controlled, um, uh, in terms of just every choice that you make, and and your choices being limited about just everything that you can imagine. And so the big picture uh, is really critical to understand, and it's the same big picture and the bigger agenda that relates to other issues as well, like the climate change issue, where there's also a lot of fear mongering, and people are very afraid, especially the younger generation, because they're making decisions based on fear, and that's not a good basis on which to make decisions, especially major decisions affecting your life, like should you get married, should you have kids, and those kinds of things. How are you going to live? uh, so and the way to not fear is, be connected, with God. Frankly, I don't know how else you really avoid fear and have a solid basis for living your life, because part of the big picture that's going on here is we're in a war, literally, between a group of people who are trying to control everybody else, and uh, and what's at stake is not only our individual health, but also what it means to be human, especially with all the artificial intelligence and so forth. And I discussed this in the last part of the book. They're really trying to change what it means to be human, and what are the ramifications of that. In what ways are they trying to do that? How is that going to change our lives? If you've got one side that's believing most humans aren't going to be even needed in the coming years. They can be replaced by machines, or humans that are made to be hybrids, part machine, part human. uh, well, they're trying to play God. So are you going to, everybody in this war has to choose a side. Are you going to be on the side of people trying to play God, or are you going to be on the side of God and connect with God, who's the one who can remove that fear from you, and and give you protection and provision and all the blessings that come from God. And so this would be another part of the advice to the younger people, that unfortunately has been um, kind of withheld from a lot of the younger people, is what's the truth about God? And it's the same people who have lied and betrayed us on other things, like about all things COVID, that have also been lying to us about God and his nature and his blessings, and everything, all things God. So
Sally, you tie things together pretty well, and you actually speak to what a lot of people are thinking out there, that there is a larger conspiracy. It's not just about the medical complex, the issues of disease and the virus that's spread, but what I always tell people to do when they're evaluating things is to follow the money. Just go back to who's winning in this situation. And if it's a type of situation that can be manipulated and there's money tied to it, it probably was manipulated. And we see evidence of that already being exposed on the nightly news. And we're glad the truth is coming out. And I've been disappointed to see that you can't trust the numbers. And I was aware of that even in my educational pursuit. I was in research projects where I saw people fudging the numbers to get the outcome they wanted, to get the grants that funded their research. And so I know that there are many people who are arising in medical professions and different organizations who get there by hook or crook. And I know that there's been a concerted effort among many institutions for these people to rise to the top so they can dictate to the rest of us. And that's what we see is a global effect, what we call the elites, and you have identified that in your book. I want to move to the question or two at the bottom that is important for the audience to be able to hear. How do we support you and what you're doing?
Okay, well, one thing would be to buy the book, COVID Vaccines and Beyond, on Amazon, so that you can arm yourself with the information that you need to be able to discuss these things, and have the evidence, at hand, and know some of the questions that you can ask of other people who still believe that the shots are safe and effective. The second thing is that we're on a mission because of the nature of and the seriousness of this issue, and the fact that a lot of our endorsers and other readers have told us that this is a very good resource for helping to wake people up to what's really going on. So we're on a mission to put this book in the hands of as many people as possible, especially healthcare professionals who need the information the most, and just give them a copy. Just put a copy in their hands, and you don't really have to say anything, but just give them a copy, because if they have a copy right in hand, they're much more likely to read it and even know about it than if nobody gives them a copy. So we've been told we've got the resource that can help to wake people up and make them aware of what's really going on, but we need a lot of help in getting the word out there that the book even exists. So we would very much appreciate your helping us out in that way.
When it's all said and done, Sally, what do you want to be remembered for?
I would say just being one of many who is trying hard to help make people aware of what's really going on, and that there's a much bigger agenda by a group of people like the wealthy elites, the globalists we talked about, that is not just conspiracy theory. Now, I've spent literally thousands of hours over the last many years on this issue of, well, is there really a group of wealthy elites that's trying to control every aspect of society or not? And when you look at the evidence, again, I'm coming from the perspective of an attorney who's looking at both sides of these issues, because a good attorney will know the evidence on both sides and will know the strongest arguments on the other side in order to assess the strength of their own case. And so, I feel very confident in saying, yes, there is a conspiracy, but it's not theory, it is fact. And do we have time for me to read just one little quote from the book to help dispel, the notion that this is just conspiracy theory?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Now, this was from David Rockefeller, who was one of the top globalists in this group. Everybody's familiar with the name Rockefeller, and in his book that was his memoirs, he made this statement. So if you're believing that all this is this conspiracy stuff is just theory, listen to what he himself admitted. He said, "Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will. If that's a charge, I stand guilty and am proud of it." So there you have an admission, a very important admission by one of the top people who's part of this group of wealthy elites that's controlling things. So my question would be, if you think this is just conspiracy theory, how do you explain an admission like that? from David Rockefeller.
I don't think there's any way that the jury would rule against you with that evidence. So very good, Sally. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
I want to ask you this. What is your experience being a guest on our show today?
Oh, well, I really appreciate, any opportunity to be able to talk about these things, because they are critical issues for every person, because they affect every single person on the planet and every aspect of everyone's life. And yet there's a lot of lies, deception. Deception is rampant, and so when there's an opportunity like this, to come on and share, uh, some of the evidence, that I've uncovered and compiled, in one place in this book, uh, it's really important, and I'm very grateful, for it, the opportunity to do that, and that you would make your podcast available for this topic. It's a little bit, not in the line of the usual kind of interviews that you do.
Well, I tend to want to bring on people that have influence and topical interest. And this COVID thing is the most interesting topic probably of the last 50 years when you talk about the impact on the world. So what better place and what better person than you to bring it out? Somebody who's studied it, who's got a balanced legal evaluation in mind, the set that a lot of people don't come from your point of view. And so I appreciate that. I want to let you have the final word now to speak to the audience. And
Sure. Well, I would say, I would encourage everyone to become a critical thinker, and not just to believe everything you hear in the major media, because they are part of what is being controlled by these globalists and the wealthy elites. And again, as you learn and look at the evidence to see why it's not just conspiracy theory, but you learn about the different strategies and patterns that the globalists use to advance their agenda, and also not just the way that they operate and the strategies they follow, but what is their bigger agenda, their fuller agenda, and how it impacts you and your family and everyone else on the planet, for that matter. It's very important. So I would really encourage people to, start reading, getting informed. There's a lot of video interviews if you prefer that format. But that takes longer to digest because there's so many. So many interviews and documentary videos out there. So being informed, but also, connect with God if you don't already have a personal relationship with Him, because in this war that we're in, you have to choose a side, and there's only two sides. There's no fence to sit on. There's no sideline to sit out on and sit this one out. You can't do that, because if you don't make a choice, you're going to end up being on the side by default that is not going to lead to the best decisions and the best outcomes for you and your family. And so it's like, keep an open mind about these issues, and really seek what is the truth, and learn how to determine what evidence should you believe, whose report should you believe. We need to start questioning everything. But again, like I said before, do not fear, because with God all things are possible. And even for those who have had the shots, whether or not you've had any serious adverse effects or not, do not fear, because even to the extent that man's best treatments and protocols that are out there, even to the extent those aren't enough to bring you to a state of full recovery, all things are possible for God. He's a miracle working God, and I've seen just amazing things happen. I know Dr. Bill has seen, just some amazing things happen, and and that's what it is all about. And that's what our life is all about. And so I think that would be my final words.
Thank you, Sally. It's not just a war between ideologies of vaccines. It's not about just small things. This is a bigger war. This is a bigger issue. It's good versus evil. It's unfortunately, it's us against them. And you want to be on the us side of this issue, I think, because as we hear from Sally, we feel like God's on the side of the people who are more vocal right now about what's not working and what's not fair and what's been held in check away from our ears. And we're finally getting the truth come out in many realms. So thank you for being part of the truth seekers, being part of the people who are displaying real bravery, I think, to stand up and speak against the powerful elites. And I pray your protection and power to you for a strong voice as you go out and speak the truth. And to our listeners, the book is available, and I hope you'll take advantage of starting to understand that it's not just about the virus, it's not about the COVID, it's about the war that we face from this point on. Thank you, Sally.
Okay, Dr. Bill.
You're welcome. So everyone, thank you for attending another session of the Influencers Podcast. And certainly we have had our eyes opened and ears peaked today to a new answer to a lot of questions that you might have had. And this is a great resource for those, and also a rally call too, for those who want to understand that we can't just sit back and watch. We need to be active and understand that there's more to it than just observing from the sidelines. So it's Dr. Bill Williams on the Influencers Podcast, and I urge you to go out and become influential today.